The wrench slipped from her hand and clattered against the concrete floor. Mara Lindqvist stood frozen in the doorway of the repair shop her grandfather built, staring at the man in the charcoal suit holding the new deed. "This building belongs to me now," he said, his voice flat as steel. Behind him, two men were already peeling the old sign off the wall. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. 6 months later, she would be standing in his office, wearing his company's badge, watching him sign a check with her name on it, and neither of them would remember this moment the same way. The shop sat on the corner of Delmer and Ninth, wedged between a laundromat that had closed years ago and a diner that never quite closed at all. A hand-painted sign above the door read Lindqvist and Son Auto Repair, though there had been no son in 3 generations, only daughters, and Mara had stopped correcting people about that a long time ago. She had grown up under that sign. She had learned to change oil before she learned to drive, learned to read an engine's complaints the way other kids learned to read faces. Her grandfather taught her that a machine never lied to you. It told you exactly what was wrong if you knew how to listen. If you're the kind of person who believes some stories are worth staying until the very end for, hit that subscribe button now, because this one earns it. She was 31 years old, and she had run the shop alone for 4 years, ever since her grandfather's hands had started shaking too badly to hold a torque wrench. The shop did not make her rich. It barely made her anything most months. But it kept the lights on, kept 3 part-time mechanics employed, and kept a promise she had made to an old man in a hospital bed who had asked her, with what strength was left in his voice, not to sell it no matter what anyone offered. She had never imagined the offer would come in the form of an eviction. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, tucked between a parts catalog and a water bill, and for a moment she thought it was junk mail, the kind that promised to buy her building for cash in 7 days. Then she saw the letterhead. Voss Industries. She had heard the name before, the way everyone in the city had heard it, attached to glass towers downtown, attached to a name that showed up in business magazines with headlines like self-made and ruthless in the same sentence. Nathaniel Voss had built an empire out of buying distressed commercial real estate and turning it into something else entirely. Something with valet parking and rooftop bars and rent that no one who used to live there could afford. The letter said the block had been sold. All of it. The laundromat, the diner, the shop. Voss Industries had purchased the entire parcel from a holding company that owned the land beneath them, a holding company Mara had never known existed, run by a landlord she had paid rent to for 4 years without ever once meeting his face. She had 30 days. She called the number on the letterhead 11 times that week. She got the same recorded message 11 times. On the 12th call, a woman with a clipped, professional voice picked up and told her that Mr. Voss did not take calls regarding property acquisitions, that all inquiries were to be directed to legal, and that legal had already sent the required notices. Mara asked if there was any possibility of negotiation, of a lease extension, of anything. The woman's voice did not change at all when she said no. She drove past the tower downtown that night, the one with Voss Industries etched into brushed steel above the entrance. 40 stories of glass lit up against a darkening sky, and she sat in her car outside it for almost an hour, engine off, hands still on the wheel, trying to understand how a man she had never met could erase something 3 generations had built with a single signature she would probably never even see him make. She did not know, sitting there, that in 6 months she would walk through those same glass doors wearing a badge with her own name printed beneath the company's logo. She did not know that the man behind that signature was about to become the person she saw more than anyone else in her life. She only knew, that night, that she had 30 days and no idea what to do with them. The eviction crew came on a gray Thursday morning in April. 2 men in Voss Industries polo shirts with a folder full of paperwork and an apologetic manner that did nothing to soften what they were there to do. Mara stood in the doorway and watched them measure the frontage, photograph the interior, note the condition of the lift and the compressor, and the shelving her grandfather had built by hand out of scrap lumber in 1987. One of them, younger than the other, kept glancing at her like he wanted to say something and couldn't find the words for it. She did not ask him to. She had learned, over the last 30 days, that sympathy from strangers changed nothing. She had spent those 30 days doing everything a person could do. She had hired a lawyer she could not afford, who told her after 2 hours of reviewing the original lease that the holding company had, in fact, acted within its rights, that the language buried in a decade-old sublease agreement had left her more exposed than she understood, and that fighting it in court would cost more than the shop was worth and take longer than she had. She had gone to 3 banks looking for a loan large enough to make a counteroffer on the building, and 3 loan officers had looked at her 4 years of thin margins and told her, in different words each time, the same thing. She had even tried, one desperate afternoon, to get an in-person meeting with Nathaniel Voss himself, showing up at the tower lobby in her cleanest work shirt, only to be stopped by security before she reached the elevator bank and asked, not unkindly, if she had an appointment. She did not have an appointment, she never would. On the day the crew came, she packed 40 years of her family's tools into the back of her truck, one crate at a time, while a man half her age changed the locks on a building her grandfather had opened before either of them was born. She kept working in silence, refusing to let her hands shake the way they wanted to. The younger crew member, the one who kept glancing at her, finally spoke as she was loading the last crate. "For what it's worth," he said, "I don't think anybody up top even knows this is a family shop. It's just an address on a spreadsheet to them." Mara did not answer him. She got in her truck, and she drove away, and she did not look back at the sign coming down, because she already knew what it looked like from the flash-forward in her own mind that she had been dreading for 30 days. She had seen it in her sleep the night before. What she could not have known, driving away from that curb with everything she owned rattling in crates behind her, was that somewhere in that glass tower, a man was about to have his own morning of reckoning, one that would begin with a spreadsheet, and a name, and a question he did not expect to ask. Nathaniel Voss did not personally review property acquisitions under $40 million. He had built his company precisely so that he wouldn't have to, a machine of analysts and directors and regional managers whose entire purpose was to keep decisions like a single auto shop on Delmer Street far below his line of sight. He trusted the machine. The machine was efficient. The machine did not get sentimental about buildings. But 2 months after the Delmer block closed, a report crossed his desk that the machine had not been designed to catch. It was buried in a quarterly compliance review, a routine audit of properties acquired in the last fiscal year, checking for code violations, outstanding liens, anything that might expose the company to liability. Most of the report was numbers, but one line item stopped him. Lindqvist and Son Auto Repair, 3rd-generation family-operated business, 41 years at location, displaced April 12. He did not know why that line caught his eye when 100 others like it hadn't. Perhaps it was the word 3rd generation. Perhaps it was that his own grandfather had run a machine shop in a city 2 states over, a business that had folded when Nathaniel was 19, a memory he had buried under 30 years of glass towers and boardrooms and had not thought about in longer than he wanted to admit. He read the line again. Then he did something he had not done in over a decade. He asked his assistant to pull the full acquisition file. What he found unsettled him in a way that spreadsheets rarely did. The Delmer parcel had been purchased not because of the auto shop, not because of anything on that block at all, but because of air rights 3 lots over that his development team wanted for a residential tower. The shop, the diner, the laundromat, they had been swept up in the purchase, the way debris gets swept up in a current, incidental to a decision made about a building none of them were even part of. Nobody in his organization had asked what would happen to the businesses already standing there. Nobody had needed to. It was not a question the machine was built to ask. He sat with that for a long time, later that evening, in an office 40 stories above a city he had spent 20 years reshaping without ever walking most of its streets. He thought about the young mechanic in the compliance photo attached to the file, a woman standing in a doorway with her arms crossed, watching 2 men measure a building that had outlived her grandfather. He did not know her name yet. He would learn it soon enough. What he felt, staring at that photograph, was something he had trained himself out of feeling years ago, something uncomfortably close to shame. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself the deal was done, the property repurposed, the businesses relocated or closed, and that revisiting decisions already made was not how empires like his stayed standing. But he kept the file open on his desk for 3 days, and on the 4th day, he did something his board would have questioned if they had known about it. He asked his assistant to find out where Mara Lindqvist had gone. She had gone, as it turned out, nowhere good. The 40 crates of tools sat in a rented storage unit on the edge of the city, and Mara sat most days in the small apartment above her aunt's garage, sending out resumes to auto shops across the metro area, most of which never called back, and the ones that did offered wages that made the math of her rent and her grandfather's medical bills impossible to close. She had thought, in the weeks after the eviction, that she might rebuild somewhere else, find a smaller space, start over from nothing the way her grandfather once had. But starting over required capital she did not have, and every bank she approached asked to see the very business history that Voss Industries had just erased with a single acquisition. She was folding laundry on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after the shop closed, when her phone rang with a number she did not recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail. She had stopped answering unfamiliar numbers weeks earlier, tired of collection calls and recruiters offering positions 2 states away. But something made her pick it up. The voice on the other end introduced herself as calling on behalf of Voss Industries, and for a moment Mara's chest went cold with something between fury and disbelief, certain this was some kind of cruel bureaucratic follow-up, a final piece of paperwork to sign, a lien she hadn't known about. Instead, the woman said that Mr. Voss would like to arrange a meeting, at Mara's convenience, at his office, regarding the Delmer Street property. Mara stood very still in her aunt's kitchen for a long moment before she answered. "There's nothing left to discuss," she said. "You already took it." "He's aware of that," the woman said, her voice carefully neutral. "He'd still like to speak with you. He asked me to say that it wouldn't take more than 20 minutes of your time and that you're free to say no." Mara almost did say no. She stood there with the phone against her ear, feeling 4 months of anger settle into her jaw, and she nearly told the woman exactly what she thought of a company that could erase 41 years of her family's history, and then, months later, offer 20 minutes as some kind of gesture. But underneath the anger was something else, something she didn't want to admit to herself. She wanted, more than she wanted to protect her pride, to look the man in the eye who had signed the paper that ended everything. "Fine," she said, 20 minutes. She wore her cleanest work shirt to the tower, the same one she had worn the day security stopped her at the lobby, though this time her name was on a list at the front desk, and a man in a suit walked her personally to the elevator. She rode up 40 floors in silence, her reflection ghosted in the polished steel doors, and she thought about her grandfather's hands, steady once, on a torque wrench, and what he would have said if he could see her now, walking into the building of the man who took everything he built. Nathaniel Voss stood when she entered his office, which she had not expected. He was younger than the photographs suggested, or perhaps just less severe in person, standing at a window with the city spread out behind him in a haze of afternoon light. He did not offer his hand right away. He seemed, for a moment she would remember much later, almost unsure of himself, a state she would come to learn was rare for him. "Ms. Lindqvist," he said, "thank you for coming." "You didn't leave much room to say no," she said. It was not quite an accusation, but it was close. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, and when she sat, he did not sit behind the desk himself, choosing instead the chair beside her, a small detail she noted without understanding why it mattered. "I read the compliance report on the Delmer acquisition 3 weeks ago," he said. "I didn't know your shop existed until then. I want to be honest about that, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve an apology that costs me nothing." Mara felt something tighten in her chest. It was almost exactly the sentence she had rehearsed in her head for months, the one she imagined delivering to whoever was responsible, and hearing him say it first left her unmoored. "An apology doesn't rebuild a shop," she said. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." He was quiet for a moment, studying her the way she might study an engine that wasn't telling her the whole story yet. "I'm not going to pretend I can give you back 41 years. I can't undo the acquisition. The land's already been repurposed. But I looked at what your grandfather built, what you kept running after him, and I don't think a business like that should have ended because of a decision nobody upstairs bothered to examine closely enough to notice it existed." "So what are you offering?" she asked. "A settlement, a check to make this go away quietly." Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of the same discomfort she had seen in the young eviction crew member's face months earlier, the look of a man being told something true about himself that he didn't enjoy hearing. "No," he said, "I'm offering you a position." Voss Industries owns 11 commercial properties across the city with mechanical infrastructure, parking structures, freight elevators, service vehicles, maintenance contracts. We currently outsource at a cost I only recently understood was absurd. I need someone who actually understands machines, not spreadsheets about machines. I'd like that person to be you. Mara sat back in the chair, genuinely startled for the first time since she had walked in. "You want to hire me?" "I want to build a division," he said, "run by someone who knows the difference between a shop that's profitable on paper and a shop that matters to the people who depend on it. I made a decision 4 months ago based entirely on the first kind of thinking. I'd like the chance to make different decisions from now on, and I don't think I can do that without someone in the room who thinks the way your grandfather did." She should have said no. Every instinct that had carried her through the last 4 months told her to stand up, thank him for his time, and walk back out through the lobby with whatever pride she had left intact. But she thought of the storage unit full of crates, and the resumes that never got answered, and the promise she had made to a dying man that she had already, through no real fault of her own, failed to keep. She thought that perhaps there was more than one way to keep a promise, and that letting pride cost her a future was not the way her grandfather would have wanted her to honor him. "I'll need creative control," she said, "not just a title. If I'm running maintenance operations, I run them the way I'd run my own shop. No shortcuts, no spreadsheets deciding what a repair is worth before someone's actually looked at it." Nathaniel almost smiled, an expression that looked unfamiliar on his face, like a muscle out of practice. "That's the only way I'd want it run," he said. She did not sign anything that day. She told him she needed time to think, and he did not push her, which surprised her more than the offer itself had. She walked out of the tower with her mind spinning, uncertain whether she had just been offered a lifeline or a leash, uncertain whether working for the man who ended her family's business was a betrayal of everything that business stood for or the only rational way forward left to her. She called her aunt that night and talked until nearly 2 in the morning, turning the offer over from every angle she could find. Her aunt, who had known her grandfather longer than Mara had been alive, said something that stayed with her long after the call ended. "Your grandfather didn't love that building," she said. "He loved the work. The building was just where he did it. You're not betraying him by doing the work somewhere else. You'd only be betraying him if you stopped doing it at all." Mara accepted the position 11 days later. The first months were harder than she expected, not because of the work itself, which came to her the way it always had, with the same fluency she had for reading an engine's silences, but because of the way people looked at her in that building. She was the woman who used to run a shop Voss Industries had shut down, now walking the halls with a badge and an office 2 floors below Nathaniel's own. Some of the staff treated her with open curiosity, others with a kind of wary distance, unsure whether she was there to fix something or to watch them for mistakes. She ignored all of it and did what she had always done. She listened to what the machines were telling her, and she fixed what needed fixing, whether that was a freight elevator in the East Side Tower or a maintenance contract that had been quietly overcharging the company for 3 years without anyone noticing. Nathaniel noticed the results before he noticed anything else, the way he noticed most things, through numbers that had started moving in directions his other division heads couldn't explain. Repair costs across the portfolio dropped. Equipment lifespans extended. A vendor relationship that had cost the company nearly $2 million a year in inflated service fees was renegotiated within her first 6 weeks. The kind of change that normally took an outside consulting firm months and a 6-figure fee to identify. He began stopping by her floor more often than his schedule strictly required, ostensibly to review reports, though the conversations rarely stayed on reports for long. She learned things about him in those conversations that the business magazines had never printed. That his grandfather's machine shop had closed the same way hers had, swallowed by a company chasing land it didn't understand it was standing on. That he had spent 20 years building an empire designed. He admitted once, almost embarrassed by the admission, to make sure nothing like that could ever happen to him again, and had never once stopped to consider that the machine he built to protect himself might do to someone else exactly what had been done to him. She did not forgive him for the Delmer acquisition, not in any simple, clean way. Forgiveness was not a word either of them used. But she came to understand something about him that softened the anger she had carried in her chest for months, the recognition that his mistake had not come from cruelty, but from distance, from a system built so efficiently that it had made empathy structurally impossible until someone forced it back in through the cracks. 6 months to the day after the eviction crew pulled her grandfather's sign down off the wall on Delmer Street, Mara Lindqvist stood in Nathaniel Voss's office again, not as a woman asking for 20 minutes of his time, but as the director of an operations division that had, in half a year, saved the company more money than the entire Delmer block had ever generated in rent. He had a folder on his desk, and when he slid it toward her, she saw her name printed at the top of it, beneath a title she had not asked for and a compensation figure that made her sit down slower than she meant to. "I want to open a repair facility," he said. "Not outsourced, not folded into general maintenance. A standalone shop, staffed the way you'd staff it, run the way you'd run it. I want to put your grandfather's name on the door if you'll let me." Mara looked at the folder for a long moment, and then at the man across the desk. The same man who had once been nothing but a signature on a piece of paper that ended everything she thought she had left. She thought about the crates still sitting, some of them, unopened in a storage unit on the edge of the city, tools that had waited months to be needed again. "Lindqvist and Son," she said quietly. "There's never been a son." "Then we'll fix the sign," Nathaniel said. "This time we'll get it right." She did not answer right away. She sat with the folder in her hands and thought about a Thursday morning in April, a wrench clattering to concrete, a man in a charcoal suit holding a deed that had felt, at the time, like the end of everything 3 generations had built. She understood now that it had not been an ending at all. It had been the moment a machine, without a conscience, finally ran into a person who forced it to grow one. She opened the folder, picked up the pen on his desk, and signed her name beneath his, not as an employee accepting a favor, but as a partner rebuilding something neither of them could have built alone. Outside the window, the city moved the way it always had, indifferent to the small, quiet correction taking place 40 stories above its streets. A correction that would never make the business magazines, that would never be reduced to a headline about ruthless empires or redemption arcs. But that mattered more, to the 2 people in that room, than anything either of them had built before it. Do not measure a person's worth by the building they stand in or the badge they wear when you meet them. The ones who lose everything are sometimes the only ones who still remember what actually matters, and the ones who take everything are sometimes only waiting for someone to show them what they never learned to see. If this story moved you even a little, stay a while longer, because there are more like it waiting, and every one of them is a reminder that it is never too late to fix what you broke.